This is Distant Replay, the podcast that goes back in time to relive all the greatest events that we witnessed in sports. From upsets, to championships, to cultural moments, we discuss it all. Coming up on today's episode.
This one might do it, but we've caught that before, haven't we?
Sir, a little wind in his face, going from his right to the left.
And Luther holds, it is up, and the game is over. The San Diego Chargers win with almost 14 minutes of overtime played, a 29-yard field goal by Rolf Benerska, and the Chargers move on to the AFC Championship game.
Well, it might be the best game you know nothing about in the NFL. That's how it is for me, but we went back to 1981, AFC Divisional Playoff game, San Diego Chargers at the Miami Dolphins. It's known as Epic in Miami, and this game lived up to the hype. I knew nothing about it going in, and Mike, you said, hey, let's put this one on the list. The Chargers, Dolphins are playing in the NFL this week. It's a perfect lead-in. Here's a game that is considered one of the best of all time in the NFL.
Yeah, so we have the Tua Herbert rookie quarterback matchup coming up this week. And I thought, man, let's do this Chargers-Dolphins game. It's at the top of every best game in NFL history list that you look at. And I didn't really know much about it other than that clip of Kellen Winslow you always see coming off the field exhausted at the end.
So we're going to get into that today. It's going to be a fun show, I think, because it's Miami in the 80s. There's a lot going on in the crowd in this game. It's an incredible atmosphere. It's two really good teams going toe-to-toe and one of the best offensive performances probably up until that time. The statistics and the records back that up. And it had an incredible ending. It was a playoff game. There's a lot to talk about in this one, so we'll do that today on Distant Replay Podcast. You can find the game if you want to watch it online at distantreplaypodcast.com. We'll have the NBC broadcast up on our website there, so you can go back and watch it in its entirety like we did as well. Plus, we're on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Every show put up on YouTube if you prefer to listen there. So hit subscribe, rate and review. We would appreciate that as always as we continue cranking along here on the podcast. So let's jump into it. It's January 2nd, 1982. The Miami Orange Bowl is the venue for this 1981 AFC Divisional Playoff game. And Mike, I think one of the crazy things about this game is the day before they had the Orange Bowl played on New Year's Day between Clemson and Nebraska. Clemson wins its first national championship just hours before this one. This is an epic two-day, probably bender for a lot of people in Miami.
You say an epic bender for people in Miami. Now, I automatically think if I'm looking at a crowd of people in Miami in the 80s, that they're all on coke. That's just what I assume, right? It's pretty funny when that you automatically assume that. But no, in all seriousness, we have the logo from the Orange Bowl that was played the night before, like you mentioned, still at the 50-yard line. So I thought that was pretty funny as well. But yeah, you're right. I mean, what a 2-day sort of bender of football. Incredible.
So they had a great one the night before, then they've set for this game between the Chargers and the Dolphins. And so let's set the stage for this game, Mike, before we get into the actual game itself. The 1981 NFL season, you had the Dolphins won the AFC East, 11-4 record. Chargers had a tie, but they did win out on the tiebreaker in the AFC East with a 10-6 record. Your best record in football was the 49ers, 13-3 that year, a couple of 12-4 teams as well. But all eyes were on this one because this Chargers team was so good offensively.
You hear several times during the broadcast of this game where they're being referred to as like the most prolific offense ever. So that's what we're talking about here. Sort of an offense like maybe you compare it to those Rams teams, like the Greatest Show on Turf, where they're bringing things to another level and everyone is trying to catch up to them in that respect. I think that's what you have here in this Chargers team.
The San Diego offense that year set 10 NFL records. Okay, so you talk about, okay, their offense is really good. You got Dan Fouts at quarterback, Kellen Winslow, as Mike mentioned, two of the bigger names in this game. But 10 NFL records top to bottom. And it's crazy because as this game goes along, more and more records continue to be broken.
And how I judge this Chargers team is there are multiple guys on this offense that I've heard of. I obviously don't know a ton about them, but that I've heard of, right? Dan Fouts, Charlie Joyner, Kellen Winslow, like you mentioned, the running backs, Chuck Muncie and James Brooks. I mean, these are names that because this offense was this Air Coryell offense was so prolific, these names.
Yeah, there's probably a couple guys that I remembered, but for me, a lot of it, I mean, this is when we were essentially infants, Mike, toddlers. What were you, a month old at this point?
Yeah, so you got to remember, Ben. Remember we went back during the Mets Red Sox episode, and we talked about how I used to watch the VHS tape of the '86 World Series.
Yeah.
Well, I used to always watch the other VHS tape that I watched nonstop when I was growing up was an NFL Films documentary called "The History of Professional Football." So you pick up on a lot of stuff when you just watch that on loop when you're a little kid. But one name. I know you have some Cincinnati Bengals fans in your life, and they will definitely know who James Brooks is.
Yeah, he's an Auburn guy too, so he's a name
exactly.
and he was very talented, rookie in this game, and he had some speed. I mean, the speed in this game isn't as I mean, you notice speed now. It seems like obviously the game was a little bit slower back then as technology's developed and these guys train a little bit differently. But Brooks is a guy that had like a different gear than most guys in the field.
Yeah, and it's nuts. It seemed like all those guys that had somewhat of an extra gear were on the Chargers.
Yeah, that's true. You mentioned him. Chandler, another guy, Wes Chandler, showed that second gear out of Florida. The other thing about these rosters, Mike, I loved was there's a lot of Alabama guys, a lot of Alabama flavor in this game. And there was always that connection to the Dolphins. I always kind of knew that growing up. Like, there's a lot of Dolphins fans, I think, in the Alabama fan base because of the players that went through there. You know, most notably in this game, Tony Nathan, but also Bob Baumhauer, who owns a chain of restaurants in the state of Alabama. Big surprise there, right? He was a big force along that defensive line. But Tony Nathan was a big one in this one throughout the game.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, so the Bob Baumhauer thing is great. I mean, the fact that he owns restaurants, and it's a great name, too. What a great name.
Baumhauer, yeah.
Yeah, and I have in my notes, there's a lot of Alabama players. Does Ben know any of them? And apparently you do. Yeah,
Woodrow Lowe on the Chargers, the linebacker was and all that great. I mean, these guys were greats at Alabama. All these guys, and Nathan even has a movie called Woodlawn. He's from Birmingham. It's a movie about him and his life and his career that came out a few years back. So you should check that out, Mike. But he had a heck of a game. Looking at these rosters as well. I mean, Miami's roster otherwise. What did you think about it? I mean, obviously you've been watching NFL Films, VHS on loop, so you probably recognize a lot of these names. But you start the quarterbacks, David Woodley and Don Strock. I mean, Strock maybe because he's had a bit of a coaching career, but when these two guys came on the field, I was trying to remember when we went back to this game, where are we in the era of Miami quarterbacks? Because they had some great ones, obviously, but David Woodley is the guy that now is really kind of known as the guy that bridged the gap between Greasy and Marino.
Yeah, you just hit on it. You just hit on it perfect. I knew we were after Greasy, and I knew we were before Marino. And one thing I'll say, David Woodley's uniform was about 3 sizes too big. As is a major theme in this game with these preposterously big uniforms for some reason.
It's like, Mike, back in the day, I mean, you were this way like in high school, like you don't have the money. They didn't have these, I'm sure that these big apparel contracts weren't existing at this time. You just bought like the jerseys and you got to fit in them, right? I mean, it's
exactly.
Like everybody has one size and either it fits you great or it's loose and baggy. Like some of these guys had probably like 28-inch waists and their shoulder pads were probably like 3 feet across.
They looked like if you were to dress up like a football player for Halloween and try to exaggerate how big a football player was with his pads, that's what they looked like. But anyway, Don Strock, I have to mention this. So Don Strock, as we'll get to, came in relief during this game for David Woodley, a quarterback for the Dolphins. Don Strock looks like an actor on TV that would play a quarterback.
Straight out of Central Casting, right?
Yeah, like a quarterback that you don't believe, like, oh, this guy couldn't be a quarterback in real life. Look at him; he's a little older, looks a little frail. He throws bullets though.
Fouts kind of looks like that too. Although he's not frail, he's obviously a bigger man, but he looks like that kind of like lead actor role that might star as a quarterback, right? It's kind of a big burly guy that takes the field. I feel like all the guys from the '80s kind of felt that way. They all kind of look similar.
Yeah, but they both threw bullets, man.
Yeah, they were great quarterbacks. And they showed out in this game. Anything else on these rosters that stood out to you? I mean, I go down the name and I don't even know like who you would even highlight. I mean, some guys obviously had big impacts in this game, and we'll go through that as we talk about the actual flow of the game. But anybody else you want to highlight before we move on?
No, I'm good, man. Let's get into these coaches. 2 legendary head coaches.
So Don Shula on the Miami sideline, and everybody knows Don Shula. I mean, he's the greatest, probably the greatest coach of all time, and maybe of all levels of coaching, but definitely NFL up there with Vince Lombardi. But Don Coryell on the other sideline, and every time, Mike, I swear, every time they said his name, like all I could think of was The Godfather. It sounded like Don Corleone every single time the announcer said his name.
Exactly. And and it did sound like that. Now that I'm thinking, that's pretty funny. But one thing you notice about Don Shula is he's held in such high esteem, even at this time, that the announcers never question any decision he makes. Kind of reminded me of Belichick, like now.
Yeah.
And Coryell, obviously, this time period of Chargers football is known as the Air Coryell time period. So again, this offense that sort of changed the way, the future of football would look from an offensive standpoint. And I love how Coryell is the kind of coach that has his, collared shirt on, golf kind of shirt with khakis, but like every big play, he's got his hands on his knees, sort of bending down, getting into the play. He's one of those guys. I love that.
He didn't look like the type of guy that would be, a game changer in the offense. He looked like an old school defensive style coach. Just by, if you looked at him and didn't know anything about him, that's what I would guess. I would never guess that he was an innovator on offense.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. That's from looks. Exactly.
So those are your two coaches, and you're right. Two great names on each sideline, and this was a showdown really of kind of epic proportions. I mean, with the Dolphins, they had the really good run in the early 70s. So they're in a spot now where they haven't been as dominant. They've had a few years in the late 70s that weren't as good, in mid 70s, but now they're kind of picking up steam again. The beginning of the 80s, they have a couple late 70s, early 80s. They're in the playoffs a couple times, moving into this era. The Chargers, though, I don't know that I probably knew it, but I don't know the history of the Chargers that much. But you go back to the Chargers year by year, they don't have a ton of success, Mike, especially at a playoff level. So this is a big deal for Chargers fans.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So like you said, if you look back through their history, they're experiencing sort of, I think we've all been there as a fan, where your team is doing things that they've never done before. I think that's what this era was for Chargers fans, and probably one that they've looked very fondly back on even to this day.
Exactly. They had made the playoffs a couple of times, but since joining the NFL, they had not made the playoffs until 79. They were there 79 and 80. Had one win combined between those 2 years heading into 81. And this was a year that they felt pretty good about, with the offense where it was and with the setup that they had and the players and the personnel they had. I felt pretty good about this one. One other note I had on Woodley, Mike, before we move on, the quarterback for the Dolphins. He was only one of two quarterbacks in NFL history, along with the great Kenny the Snake Stabler, to have a winning percentage over 600 while throwing at least 10 more interceptions than touchdowns. How's that for a stat?
So this is what if you're a David Woodley fan from back in the day, this is the stat you bring up when you're trying to make the case that, hey, maybe we shouldn't have gone to Marino.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's kind of what you back up. He's right there in line with Ken Stabler. But look, another note too, offensive wise on the Chargers, when you're talking about these players and this personnel, just kind of set the stage. Fouts this year, 33 touchdown passes, which at the time was fourth best in NFL history. 33 touchdown passes. Mike, question for you: what would that be on the all-time list today? 33 touchdown passes. Give me a guess.
Wow,
that was fourth all-time in 1982 when this game was played.
I would say in the hundreds.
No, not quite that bad. Tied for 53rd today is where 33 touchdowns put you. So not
a lot of those top 50 though probably came in the last decade, I would imagine.
Yeah, and my guess was about where you were. I was thinking it's probably not even listed if you went to find a list, but it was good for tied for 53rd. So still an all-time season, obviously, for Dan Fouts. Okay, broadcast, Mike. NBC. I just kind of assumed going into this was probably going to be a CBS game, but it's an NBC. It had like an old red. It didn't have the peacock color logo. It was like all red. Same style of logo, but all red instead of the multicolor. And then the big N behind it. It was a different logo, old logo. Don Criqui and John Brody. Do you know anything about this team?
All right, so Don Criqui was on a lot of the AFC NBC games when I was a kid. So he would have some of the Jets games. So I did know who Don Criqui was. And John Brody, again, going back to my history of NFL football documentary days, I knew he was an old quarterback for the 49ers, but knew nothing really else about him.
No sideline in this game. We're kind of, in the early days of television coverage. It was a pretty good production overall, I think, but NBC had the rights to this one. So let's jump into the game. This is the Epic in Miami. So some notes from the first quarter, and again, we got notes on kind of each quarter. We'll do it that way rather than try to give you a play-by-play breakdown. But one of the first lines that I loved in this game, on Coryell. I don't know if you picked this up. I think it was Cricky, but he said when describing him, when other either players or coaches describe him, they said he has the face of a man whose shoes are 2 sizes too small. If you can
I have
picture
that in my notes, but to hear you say that is, and you got to hear Don Cricky's voice when he says it too. Like he has one of those notable, play-by-play announcer voices. That was a funny quote, and an unintentional funny quote was John Brody in the first quarter talking about the Chargers offense and Dan Fouts, saying that he doesn't think another quarterback will ever average over 300 yards passing per game again during a 16-game season.
Can you imagine?
How wrong. That might be the most incorrect take in NFL analyst history.
Yeah, I mean, the Dolphins at that point had they allowed maybe one opponent over 300 yards passing, I think, in the season. They said something like that. So it's pretty rare. So, I mean, I kind of see it, but very short-sighted by John Brody on that comment. A couple of things. Play clock on the screen at times. It was a very brief – they'd briefly show it kind of superimposed over the middle of the screen – not middle of the screen, middle of the bottom of the screen. Very big numbers just for a few seconds at a time. You wouldn't get it very often, but that's the only time we'd get. There was another cool clock that would show top middle of the screen. Again, random times in the game. It wasn't all the time at all. I was caught off guard by, we talk about some of the players, the names in these games, the kickers, the names of these kickers, Mike. Is it just, did I just notice it because it's kickers and it's funny because the names and they're in the position they play? But Rolf Berniski kicking for the Chargers, who, going back to look at it, was apparently a really good player, but I'd never heard of this guy. He's like an all-time kicker name.
Yeah, Ralph Bernerska for the Chargers and Uwe von Schaman for the Dolphins.
Yeah.
Great names. And one thing of note, Ben, Uwe von Schaman was number 5. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know the other famous Dolphins kicker who was number 5?
Ray Finkle?
Ray Finkle, who Uwe von Schaman looked exactly like.
Yeah, I thought about it during the game. Is that character modeled after Uwe von Schaman?
That's
what
I have no clue, but we might have just figured something out.
I really was thinking that, especially with the way this game played out. That's a great note. Ray Finkle. Loved it. I was thinking of Finkle, too, during this game. I noticed in this game, too, there were some big defensive linemen in this game. Most notably, Leroy Jones, who was 6'8", but that dude was a hoss along the San Diego defensive front.
Yeah, there were some. They made. I think we're at a point in the NFL history where the defensive linemen are getting bigger, but the offensive linemen are still like not even over 300 pounds.
Yeah, good point.
They made a line about how one of the announcers had a line about how big the Chargers' offensive line was, and not one of them was over 300 pounds. And one thing of note is that we've talked about how good the Chargers' offense was, but the Miami defense from Week 12 on this season hadn't allowed more than 16 points in a game and no more than 160 yards passing in any one game. So this was really kind of strength against strength as we headed towards the playoffs here.
So we had an early 3-0 start for San Diego. This was like maybe one of the worst opening quarters you could ever envision your team having for the Dolphins. So field goal opens it up. All right, the Dolphins get a chance. They don't do anything. They punt. Wes Chandler, as we mentioned, very dynamic player, a lot of speed, very electric in the return game. 56-yard punt return for a touchdown, which, by the way, interesting little punt formation we never see anymore. Kind of an up man in front of the return guy. So, like, separated by about 10 or 15 yards, I guess, in case the punt was short. I don't know, but he was the up man in that and fielded that punt.
Yep. And you got Wes Chandler. You made a good point on Wes Chandler. He has a 54-yard reception on the first drive, the field goal drive, 56-yard punt return for a touchdown. He's got 100 total yards, and it's 10-0 Chargers, and things get even worse for them if that's possible on the ensuing kickoff.
This kickoff was as bad as you'll see. It was a pretty normal kickoff, and it looked like it was a little bit short, not that short, but the blockers all kind of formed, kind of back up and formed, and they kind of pushed forward, and as they do, the ball falls in right behind them. Literally no one on the Dolphins touches the ball. It bounces backwards. San Diego falls on it, and they take the ball over, and like 3 plays later, Muncie punches it in, a nice run. It's 17-0 Chargers, and you're going, wait, what just happened? Like all your Miami fans there that are having, one heck of a new year to start are all of a sudden just in shock of what's going on.
Exactly. So at this point, the electric Miami crowd is like completely subdued and shocked. Like this happened so quick, this 17-0, that I literally looked up online and made sure we had the right game. Like, were we a year off? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
because these two teams, I think, played 2 years in a row in the playoffs. And I was like, did we have the wrong year here? But I checked. I'm like, no, this is the Epic in Miami game, which is the worst name for a big game that I think has ever been created. And I think maybe why people don't remember it, by the way.
They block it.
But anyway, 17-0 in the blink of an eye. And on the next drive, okay, the Dolphins throw an interception, which gets returned to the 9-yard line.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, because I thought the 17-0, I read on my notes, this is about as bad as you'll see, assuming that nothing else was going to happen the rest of the quarter, right? That's kind of like, that's how bad it was, knowing this game was so good. Like, there's no way they're going to give up another touchdown and go down 24-0 in the first quarter. But after that interception, James Brooks catches a touchdown pass. It's 24-0. By the way, Mike, at this point in the broadcast, I have no idea how much time's left in the quarter.
No clue.
It's 24-0. I haven't seen a clock yet.
Yeah, there were more graphics in this game than most of the other games we've done from the 80s and early 90s. I'll give them that. But during this time period, you're like, is the first quarter ever going to end? And two, are the Chargers ever going to stop scoring points?
I can't imagine watching this game in real time. The feeling of okay, as a Miami fan, you're probably like, okay, well, is this quarter ever going to end? But also like, okay, the quarter's still going, so we still have a chance to maybe come back and chip away at this 24-0 lead. But I have no idea when the quarter's going to end. But that's where we were, and that's what I was thinking when this is 24-0. I was going to write down, 3 minutes left, 4 minutes left, and I was like, I have no idea. There could be 8 minutes left. It could be 20 seconds. I've got no clue. But the Dolphins get the ball back. And another note in this quarter, how dominant it is. It's 24-0 before the Dolphins either have a first down or a single yard of total offense.
And it's the most points the Dolphins have given up in a quarter since 1968.
I mean, again, just noting how bad this quarter is for the Dolphins. And it finally, mercifully, comes to an end for Miami and Miami fans. 24-0. So let's go into the second quarter, Mike. Maybe, I'm thinking, like, what's going to happen here? Because obviously, it's going to be a comeback. Well, your boy, Yvonne Shaman, gets a field goal. Just get on the board, right? I think that's what they're saying in the broadcast. Hey, just get some points. It's 24-3. And it could have been even worse because the play before that, the Chargers drop a clear, easy interception on the goal line.
I'm glad you hit on that because it was a great drive. Don Strock has entered the game at this point, by the way.
Yeah.
So David Woodley has exited and central casting Don Strock has entered. And I was like awestruck when I saw how much this guy looks like a quarterback from a movie. Like, I couldn't believe it when I saw him.
You love that.
But he's got like the tan. He's got everything. I'm telling you, go back and watch. But anyway, that interception that almost happened it was like right on the goal line after the Dolphins have momentum from a good drive, that would have been like an ultimate backbreaker if that guy held on to that ball.
It's got to be ball game. And he's probably running for a little while too. I mean, he had a couple guys that could have made a tackle, but he's probably getting a pretty good return on that. And at that point, it would just suck the life out of him. But they were able to survive, get 3 points. Next possession, too, you start to see the momentum. Dolphins get a sack fumble. And the crowd at this point, and we talk about the crowd a lot in these games because I still think, and I don't think sports have jumped the shark, but like sports in person, the more I watch these old games, I think about how we'll never see atmospheres like this again. This crowd it's like every single play was the final play of a Super Bowl. I mean, fans up on their feet, foam fingers in the air, people are jumping up and down, kids are on parents' shoulders, you got drinks in hands. I mean, it is, and everybody's just screaming top of their lungs. The entire game starting, it slowed down a little bit in that first quarter, but at this point forward, it's just absolute insanity.
I mean, I referred to it earlier as a 2-night bender for football in the city of Miami, and we are full on into the second night here. Once Fouts fumbles, the Dolphins punch it in for a touchdown, and it's 24-10. The crowd is going absolutely berserk, and I can't stress like how much the shots of the crowd were almost as equally as good as the actual game action. They were absolutely an electric factory.
I'm telling you, you think we're exaggerating, but it's true. Like I thought the same thing watching the crowd. Like I would just watch these people, like a shot of these people going crazy constantly. It It was incredible. But again, I don't think we'll see those errors. And I think a lot of it we talk about on the show is, the technology, the way it's changed and the way people actually experience the game. They don't actually experience the game and get involved and immersed in it. They're kind of half checked in, half checked out. But this was not the case in 1982, January 2nd, 1982 in Miami. That is for sure. So game clock is this is the first time I've noticed a game clock, by the way, at this point. It's 5:13 left in the quarter, in the half here. Don Strock is starting to cruise a little bit. He hits Joe Rose for a nice strike, 24-10. Okay, Don Strock got it going a little bit, feeling pretty good. And then you got the Dolphins getting another stop next possession, Mike. Your boy Bernishkin.
Rolf Bernishka.
I mean, whatever. We'll call him Rolf. He misses a long field goal, which is kind of a theme of this game a little bit. Missed field goals. They get the ball back with 30 seconds. And I think the half's over at this point. I mean, especially in this era, nobody's getting down the field in 30 seconds. That's just never going to happen. But maybe one of the best plays you'll see, and combined with the fact that it was so unexpected, and today it doesn't seem like a big deal. But Dolphins get a couple of plays, get it down the field a little bit. They make the perfect hook and lateral executed to absolute perfection. The pass was caught in stride, like as he's bringing it in, the toss to Tony Nathan, who's coming from the backfield, streaking down the right sideline, in stride. The defense is pushing up the field while Nathan goes running by. I don't know, Mike, if this is the first documented play of this type in an NFL game, but to me, it looked like it could have been because the defense had no clue what was happening.
Yeah, this hook and lateral is executed like you execute it in practice when there's no defense.
Yeah, it was amazing.
That's the best way to put it. It was. I can't believe this is the first time I've ever seen this play, and how you hit it on the head. How surprising it was, and it's to end the half too. Yeah. This is the last play before halftime.
It's like the one you draw up, and it never. I mean, your team never can execute it, but this was absolutely perfect.
Yeah, picture perfect. We can't put it any more clear than that. And at this point, the crowd is on a fever pitch, to say the least.
24-17. So 24 unanswered for the Chargers to start the game in the first quarter. But the Dolphins come back 17 unanswered in the second quarter. And now we got a ball game here heading into halftime. So third quarter, Dolphins pick right back up. We kind of wondered, hey, what are these two teams going to do coming out of the locker room? Dolphins under Don Shula, ready to go. Strock's still in the game, by the way. He's kind of earned the spot now. It's 24-17. He hits Rose again to make it 24-24, the first drive of this second half. And I'm sitting here thinking, Strock to Rose, is this like a great quarterback tight end duo we never talk about?
Yeah, it's like they look like Brady to Gronkowski at this point. They still
like Fouts to Winslow. Forget about it. It's Strock to Rose.
Winslow. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's a good way. We got a great quarterback tight end combo in this game. No need to go to Gronk and Brady, but it's crazy. You have San Diego 24 unanswered, followed by Miami 24 unanswered, and it's a new ball game.
Yeah, and the Dolphins get it back with 8.5 left. With a chance to take the lead for the first time. It doesn't happen though. They don't score, kind of finally slowed down a little bit. Chargers maybe catch their breath some. And Chargers get the ball back. And again, we talked about Winslow a little bit. He's had a pretty good game, but he kind of really elevates his performance here in the second half. And it kind of starts here with a nice catch down the seam to make it 31-24. And again, I think a lot of the Tecmo Bowl celebrations, Mike, that we've seen come from this. Not from this game, but we see like this era of football because you had the spikes in the end zone where just like you would see in Tecmo Bowl, like throw the ball back like Gronk does now, but throw the ball all the way back in your arm and just slam it to the turf as hard as you can. But then you had Winslow in his celebration dunking it over the crossbar. And the announcers kind of didn't make a big deal out of this, but there's no way this was happening very often, a guy dunking on the crossbar. This had to be one of the first times it ever happened.
And the announcers went the other way on Winslow. They were criticizing him for doing it because he almost got hurt when he came down after the dunk.
Yeah.
Now, one thing to remember about Winslow here, if you knew one thing about this game before this podcast, it was probably Winslow's like legendary performance. We haven't mentioned him much, but at this point, he's 9 receptions, 117 yards, and he's approaching like a couple playoff records in terms of receptions in a game. So this is where you see that lore of Kellen Winslow and how we think of it today sort of start to kick in.
Yeah, and we hadn't mentioned him because, I mean, he's made the catches as kind of part of the offense, but he hadn't had any really big plays, anything notable up until this point. But
exactly. They're doing it with everyone. Wes Chandler,
right.
Charlie Joyner,
Muncie,
Kellen Winslow, and the running backs.
Yeah. So it's 31-24. Chargers regained the lead after kind of withstanding that comeback. You had the Dolphins come back. I mean, we get into a shootout at this point here late in the third quarter. Back and forth is now they've evened things up. But Bruce Hardy, beautiful 50-yard touchdown catch, and we're starting to see some long ones too on top of these shorter passes. We're starting to see some shots down the field. Here, Hardy answers with a 50-yard touchdown. It's 31-31, and all of a sudden, like you look at Strock's numbers at this point, Mike, and they are. You talk about Brody making a big deal out of Fouts averaging 300 yards. He probably was about to just lose himself at the sight of Strock's numbers here with what does he have, 3 touchdowns at this point? He's only had like 4 incompletions, something like that.
All right, so Strock to this point is 21 of 27 for over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. And remember, he came in the game at the beginning of the second quarter.
Yeah, this is like not even 2 full quarters of football.
Yeah.
Can you think about that?
And then now it's 31-31. So this is like you said, we're getting into shootout territory here.
31-31. Fouts next possession throws a pick. A deflected ball goes up. One of the Blackwood brothers. By the way, there's 2 Blackwood brothers in the secondary here. Okay, we didn't even mention them, but the two brothers playing in the secondary of this Dolphins team reminded me a little bit of the McCourty brothers. It doesn't happen a lot, but you have the McCourty brothers now in the NFL. But one of the Blackwood, I don't remember which one it was, gets the interception there off a deflected ball. And by the way, on this interception, he's not settling for like a 5-yard return. As he's getting tackled, he throws a lateral to a teammate who returns it another like 15 or 20 yards to get him inside the 20.
Yeah, I always thought Don Shula was known as a conservative coach. I mean, you have them pulling hook and laterals to end the half, and now on an interception, you have the defensive back trying to lateral the ball.
I know. Was he like fired up? We didn't really see many reaction shots of Shula. He always seemed pretty calm. But yeah, to your point, I think like that would be something he'd be like, "Oh my God, guys, what are we doing out here? Protect the football. Number 1 rule: protect the football." You got these guys. You got the Blackwood brothers throwing it around in the secondary on an interception return. But quarter comes to an end. It's 31-31, setting up an epic in Miami fourth quarter. Mike, it starts off first play. Tony Nathan, my man Tony Nathan, who has a huge. Like, he started off a little bit slow, but he seems like he's in on every other play on the offense at this point for the Dolphins. He runs one in, takes it in, 38-31. Dolphins take their first lead of the game.
So this Tony Nathan rushing touchdown, and he was involved in a hook and lateral. Is this a part of his movie that you mentioned before?
It could be. I haven't seen the movie yet. I need to.
Wow, you haven't seen the movie?
No,
the Tony Nathan biopic. You haven't seen it?
No, I have not seen it yet, but I need to. After this game, I appreciate him more. I've always heard a lot about him, but like I've never really seen him play, obviously, because he played it's before our time a little bit. But the guy was all over, and maybe one of the best pass catchers out of the backfield. The guy was making all kinds of catches. But the Dolphins finally take a lead, 38-31. You kind of starting to feel like, hey, I mean, crowd obviously is into it. We know that. But you kind of start to feel, okay, the Dolphins are taking control of this game. And they get the ball back and are like eating clock effectively. I mean, as back and forth this game has been, the Dolphins have put this game into first gear and just slowed it down, right? We're going 3-4 yards at a time. Great drive. I mean, Strock's executing perfectly. He's hitting outs. He's hitting short passes, hitting Nathan out of the backfield. They're running as they need to, working the ball down the field. Here's the clock's winding down. We're under 5 minutes. And very critical time in this game, Mike. They are down to the 20-yard line. Okay, down to the Chargers' 20-yard line. Under 5 minutes to play. Up by 7. A field goal here doesn't ice it, but you're in a really good spot. A couple notes. I'm sure you probably have a couple here too. Franklin or Nathan's running the ball really well at this point. They're giving it to him. I think even Brody says this is where you just feed Nathan the football. Just give him the football, let him run. I mean, that's where we are in this game. Burn clock, every play is like 45 seconds, something like that. Instead, they hand it off to another back, Franklin, who, when the handoff's given, Cricky says, the ball's given to the sure-handed Franklin. And as he's saying that, Franklin gets hit in the hole and loses the ball, which, by the way, neither one of the announcers noticed the ball was gone as San Diego's fallen on it. And next thing you know, it's a turnover. In a blink of an eye, this thing went from they're putting the bow on this comeback to they just made a critical mistake that now Fouts has a chance to turn this thing around.
If you're a Dolphins fan in this spot, the one thing that can't happen is what happened when Andrew Franklin fumbles the ball with 4:30 left and San Diego recovers. We're talking about a drive Miami was on here where the announcers are already talking about Miami winning the game. We're talking about how tired San Diego is because remember, it's a warm night in South Florida. The Chargers defense has been on the field a lot since this comeback has been mounted. We're coming off again, some turnovers from San Diego, which made it, even more of an onus on their defense. So all the momentum is with the Dolphins, like you mentioned. And the one thing that can happen happens. The fumble by Franklin opens the door for the Chargers.
And at this point, too, as the Chargers are starting to go on offense again, to note about the Winslow, he's pretty beaten up at this point. I think we had seen him on the bench a little bit, and he's just, I don't know, it's a combination of being exhausted and being injured a little bit. Maybe his shoulder, Mike. Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was his shoulder. I think it was a combo of both.
Yeah, and like he'll make a catch and go off the field, and it happens on this drive as well. He makes his 11th catch on this drive, 11th reception of the game, which is a new NFL playoff record, single game playoff record, 11 catches in a game. And the Chargers drive right down the field and are able to tie it up, Mike, with 58 seconds left. A beautiful pass, by the way, in the back of the end zone, which Fouts kind of lofted it up. Winslow is breaking off his man to the back corner of the end zone. And I don't know who Fouts was even throwing it to. He has another receiver coming in behind him along the back of the back line of the end zone to catch it as it went over Winslow's hands. I think Winslow thought it was for him. He couldn't get to it. It went from just missed it to, oh my God, my teammate's there to catch it, to tie it up at 38.
Yep, floated that pass right in there to James Brooks. Again, I don't know who was really intended for, but look, this is just one of those moments where you're like, wow, what a game this is. And again, you finally get updated on how much time is actually left. I'll be honest, until they said there was 58 seconds left when he caught this ball to tie the game, I didn't know it.
Yeah, it's impossible. It's impossible. What an awful experience it was trying to watch these games back in the day. I've come to realize that. So I'm thinking, okay, heading overtime. But wait, the Dolphins actually get the ball back down the field. This game had so many twists and turns that I was not even expecting. And a lot of times we've already seen the games we've watched, Mike, so maybe that's why it is. But so many things happen in these games that we watch that we've never seen that just come out of nowhere, like the Dolphins getting the ball back down the field. I thought under a minute. Again, these offenses aren't known to be so prolific where getting down the field in 20 seconds isn't a big deal like it is today. But Strock gets them moving once again. And by the way, in the course of this drive, breaks the record for completions in a game at 27. Think about that. Just 27 completions was the record in a playoff game, but he hits it. And your boy Uwe Von Schamann, which is why I think Finkle was maybe modeled after this guy. He's got a kick from 43 yards to win it. I mean, almost a gimme today in the NFL, and really almost any time. But again, kickers, Mike, you just never know what to expect.
This Uwe Von Schamann Finkle here, he's coming into this game. So he's got a 43-yard kick to put the Dolphins ahead here. But during the season, he's 4 for 10 on field goals from 40 to 49 yards and only 8 for 19 in his career. I mean, how much has the field goal kicking game in the NFL changed? Now, if a guy is at that percentage from 40 to 49 yards, he doesn't have a job very long.
I know. I thought that too when I saw those numbers. I was like, man, these are not impressive stats at all. And that's what I thought about like Rolf when I saw his stats. Like they weren't that much better. I'm thinking, this guy must not have been in the league long. I went back and he's like one of the greats in Chargers history. But that's kind of where we are. So now we go to overtime after that block, a missed field goal. I think it was partially blocked by Winslow, wasn't it?
I do not remember.
I think it was. I think they actually went down and showed on the sideline that it was actually him that actually blocked it. Maybe I'm wrong there, but I think that's correct. So we go to the overtime. This is the 6th overtime game in NFL history, I think, in the playoffs at this point. San Diego gets the ball first. Again, Mike, I'm thinking, okay, we're going to go down the field. This is going to be it. The Chargers are going to win it. Well, they're moving the ball okay. Nothing spectacular. The Dolphins get a huge sack on this drive to make it 3rd and 20. I think every fan base has that moment. And when you're watching, you go back to a game and say, man, we had this team at 3rd and X or 4th and X. For Georgia fans, it's the Tua play. For Alabama fans, I go back to the Tennessee game in 2003. Alabama had Tennessee in like 3rd overtime, like 4th and 19 or something like that. They completed a pass and ended up winning that game. for the Dolphins fans, this has to be up on this list. 3rd and 20, they have the Chargers right now. Winslow makes a catch of about maybe, 7 yards along the sideline, makes a couple moves, takes contact, breaks a tackle, falls forward, and gets his first down. And this is the play, right, that we always see as he's carried off the field after making this. I mean, like literally the Dolphins player is kind of holding him up.
Yeah, this is the play of the game. If you're, from a Winslow standpoint, showing just that he gave every ounce of himself, one of those kind of efforts in this game. And after this, his shoulder is really hurt and he's just exhausted from the heat. But great effort on this 3rd and 20. But our friend, Mr. Bernershka, would make another appearance.
Bernershka, your boy. Yeah, Rolf, as I like to call him. Again, dude, I'm sitting there going, okay, that's a good drive. I mean, a really good game. It's going to end in overtime here. They got a 26-yard field goal. 26 yards. Essentially middle of the field.
To win the game now. So there's no rule like there is now where the other team needs to get the ball.
Right, sudden death. Sudden death. Rolf yanks it left. It's missed. Dolphins fans go nuts in the end zone, the bleachers that are in the end zone there. And at this point, though, in the broadcast, I'm not sure what happens because as you'll see on the YouTube link, there's missing footage, and they have to fast forward five minutes in the game. But Dolphins obviously don't do a whole lot in their first possession in overtime. So San Diego gets the ball back and move it right down the field and set up a 29-yarder, a chance again for Rolf to redeem himself, and he does to win it, 41-38. So both kickers have chances to win it. Both miss it at one point, but ultimately Rolf is the guy to get it done, 41-38, and the Chargers close it out.
Yeah, just the ebbs and flows and the emotions of this game, if you're a fan of either of these two teams, was absolutely bonkers. I mean, you had high-flying offensive play. You had missed kicks, which is like the full range of emotions when you're a fan, how mad you get at these kickers. You had 14 minutes of overtime. So when this 29-yard field goal for Bernershka goes through the uprights to win the game for San Diego, we're in the 14th minute of overtime here. So just a long game. Everyone's exhausted at the end, but it was an absolute classic.
It was. It might have been one of the more fun games for me to watch out of the ones we've done, and we've done a lot so far. And I don't know, it's because maybe it's better when we go into it not knowing anything about the game, Mike. And I wish I would not have seen the score, but as I do research as we're going along, it's almost inevitable that you're going to run into the score at some point, because this one would have been even more exciting to watch, having no idea what the score is going to be and how this one actually would end up. But even knowing what the final was, getting there was an incredible journey. So the Chargers advanced in the playoffs to the AFC Championship. They would play the Bengals. Yes, the Cincinnati Bengals were the 1 seed in the AFC. They would lose that game 27-7, and the Bengals would go on to lose in the Super Bowl this year to San Francisco 26-21. The Dolphins, of course, would bounce back the next year. Had a really good year, Mike. Would make it to the Super Bowl, lose to the Redskins. They made it to the Super Bowl 2 out of the next 3 years, losing both times.
Yep, and something of note with the Chargers is that next week when they played Cincinnati, wasn't that the coldest game on record?
Yep,
weather-wise, and they went from South Florida heat right to Cincinnati in that cold weather, and Miami the next year, I believe that was the year they beat the Jets in the AFC Championship game.
You are correct, sir. 14-0.
14-0. Yep.
Do you watch that one on VHS, or is that one not saved around the Noto household?
Yeah, that one didn't make it.
Oh, so what a game! What a game! Let's go to some post-game stuff, Mike, as we always do. Let's go outdated. I think you probably have a couple things here for outdated, right? I'm going to start off. How about coaches with no headset? Shula and Coryell just walking the sidelines, no communication with their coaches outside of face-to-face.
That's complete trust. Now, I don't know at this point are the receivers still running in the plays to the quarterback at this point?
I don't know, probably.
That's probably one way for them to control, to know what's going on. But no headsets at all. So there's no guy holding the cord in back. There's no headsets at this point.
None. Another one I have, they had the old pushed out of bounds rule on a reception. So if you, this I don't know when this was changed. It's been a few years now, but if a guy was coming down and looked like he was going to be in bounds, but the defender pushed him out, they would still give him the reception. It happened once in this game. And you think about how subjective that is for the referee to figure out whether or not he would have gotten his feet in. You kind of understand how that rule was changed, but that rule is still going on at this point. Another rule that is way different than today that I noticed for an outdated is there's no ground can't cause a fumble rule. Yeah. So remember that potential interception on a fourth quarter drive by the Chargers. Their guy caught the ball in midair, came down, fumbled the ball when he landed. The ground clearly caused the fumble, but it was ruled a fumble. So now, as we know, the ground can't cause a fumble, but back then it could, which is crazy. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Replay could have probably been used in this game, I think, too, at some point. Another outdated I've got, head referee wore a black hat while all the other officials wore white hats, which is exactly the opposite of the way it is now, because there was a moment in the game I didn't really notice it. I don't even know if you picked up on this, Mike, but the reason why I noticed it is they had a measurement at one point for a first down, and a guy in a black hat, like there's a guy in a white hat that was right next to the first down marker. A guy in a black hat comes up and signals the first down. And I was thinking, this guy, this side official is coming over here and stealing the thunder. And I looked around and I noticed all the other officials had white hats. The head referee had a black hat. Interesting picking up on that. I did not notice that. But what I did notice with the referees is they had whatever referee position they were in written out on the back of their uniform. Yeah. So like the line judge, it said line judge. Like, kind of like it was like his last name. Yeah, I saw that as well. Another outdated, Marv Levy was the Chiefs coach at this time. I don't remember that he was the Chiefs coach, but they were talking about this during this point in the game. I think they were talking about maybe scouting these two teams, and Levy had a comment, and he was a Chiefs coach. But now all we know about is the Bills. Yeah, Marv Levy's one of those guys. I loved Marv Levy. I loved his attitude, loved everything about him. So when I hear his name, I smile. He's one of those guys. Still alive at 95 years old right now, Mike. Wow. Never hear about him, but he's still alive. What about this, Ben? Did you notice the player on the sideline drinking out of a Wendy's cup? I didn't know. The yellow Wendy's cup? It must have been a sponsor. I didn't Very know. Identifiable. The Wendy's still has the same logo as they did, in the 80s. That's hilarious. We sent out a picture on Twitter, and there's also one up on Instagram, too, a shot from this game. But you'll notice, and I'm not sure how I picked it up. My wife asked me, how did you even see that? But during one of these crowd shots, and again, the crowd shots were amazing, by the way, there's a woman in the crowd talking on a cell phone. Like, this is January 1982. And meanwhile, 2 rows in front of her, there's a guy with these headphones on. He's listening to the radio. And each earphone, or at least the right side, only one we can see, looks like a full-on Walkman size around his ear, okay? That's the technology we're talking about. But this lady's on a cell phone in 1982 during the ball game. How rich was this woman? Yeah, so a couple quick hits from this picture, okay? First of all, your wife is dead on. You must have been great at Where's Waldo, because I don't know how you noticed the lady with the cell phone because of the guy with the headphones. He looked like Mary's brother in Something About Mary. That's how big these headphones were. They were like spaceships on his ears. It was, I don't know how you could know that, how preposterous those headphones were. I don't know how you noticed anything else, but that lady with the cell phone, man, balling out. It's incredible. It's not even it was pretty big, obviously. I noticed it, but I mean, what is she talking about? This is like overtime too, I think. And she's on the phone during this game. Incredible. It blew my mind when I saw this. Totally blew my mind. Again, in Miami, I assume she's talking about where the party is out there. Yeah, what are we doing tonight? Also outdated, Mike. We get our TV promo. Love the TV promos we get. NBC coming up tonight. Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell sisters, followed by Lewis and Clark, and then Television Inside and Out. No clue what that is. Everything you just said, I've never heard of any of it. You never heard of Lewis and Clark? Maybe not the TV show. I've heard of them, I should say, but I don't really know what it's about. Followed by your local news and then Saturday Night Live. But Television In and Out, looked it up. It was a series that was on for 1 year, 81 to 82. It was on a short-lived 4 weeks, Mike. 4 weeks it was on, but somehow it was on. It got that promo bump from this game too. It still didn't last. Still didn't get anywhere. So that was what I had for outdated. You got anything else to add to that list? One quick one here. The receivers, I caught a couple for both teams down in 3-point sprinter stances. Oh, yeah. That's like a classic 70s, 80s move, you know? Yeah. They look like Carl Lewis ready to go out for a pass. I love that as well. Yeah, I always noticed that. Anything social media wise, if this was around, I mean, I didn't really think about it as much during the game, but did anything stick out like how that would have been treated during this ball game? I mean, obviously kickers would have gotten a pretty big rap.
Yeah, the kickers would have gotten crushed. Don Strock would have been a hero just by his overall look and how good he played when he came in. The Winslow performance, I think, would have played really well on social media.
Don Strock even has the Hollywood name too, right? Like,
yeah,
starring Don Strock, right? I mean, it's incredible. Well, let's wrap it up, Mike. Do you have anything else you want to add on this game? I mean, this was an all-timer, and I'm glad you picked this one out. I would never have put this on the list. Had no idea about this game, and again, have no idea why this is not talked about more.
Yeah, if you haven't seen this game, come watch with us. I mean, go watch it, or hopefully you sort of watching it as we went through the podcast here. But it's well worth it, and one of those pleasant surprises. You know, this is the second 1980s football game we've done that took place at the Orange Bowl. The first one being the Doug Flutie Hail Mary game against Miami, the Miami Hurricanes, and both of these games were great.
Absolutely bananas this game was. Man, so many elements to it. It was a lot of fun. But you can find it if you want to watch it yourself on NBC. As it aired January 2nd, 1982. It'll be on our website, distantreplaypodcast.com. Connect with us on Twitter, on Instagram. We've got a couple of pictures from this game on both of those, so check them out. And then also on YouTube, we have every game put up on YouTube as well. Mike, enjoyed it, man. I'm looking forward to the next one on our list. And if you have a game for us, send it to us. We would love to take your recommendations. We'll put them on our list. We'll add them, and we'll get to them when we can. But please rate, review, and subscribe.
Yep. Looking forward to the next one. And don't forget, rate, review, subscribe. And until next time.